It was a quiet morning in Ridgeway, the kind of small town that pretended the world's noise couldn't reach it. The sun had barely climbed above the church steeple, and the main street still smelled of dew and yesterday's rain. Shopkeepers rolled up their blinds. A school bus groaned past, children pressing faces to the glass. Inside the cafe on the corner, the day began the same way it always did, with the hiss of espresso and the soft clinking of cups. At her usual corner table sat Gloria Hall. No one really noticed her anymore. She had become part of the furniture of that cafe, as natural as the old clock above the counter that ran 5 minutes slow. She was in her late 60s, small and neatly dressed, the kind of woman who carried herself like she'd learned dignity before she learned to walk. Every morning at 8 sharp, she ordered one black coffee. No cream, no sugar, just strong, honest bitterness. The barista, a young woman named Dana, didn't even ask for her order anymore. She simply nodded, poured, and placed the steaming mug in front of her. Gloria thanked her with a smile that never lasted more than a heartbeat. Then she sat, hands folded around the cup, eyes distant but awake. Some mornings she read, most mornings she just watched. She watched the people who rushed and the ones who lingered, the couples who argued quietly and the workers who escaped for a few moments before returning to their shifts. To the others, she was invisible. To herself, she was observing. She knew the town, the faces, the rhythms. And she knew that silence could say things words never could. That morning, the bell over the cafe door jingled louder than usual. A man stepped in wearing a fresh police uniform, boots polished to mirror shine. Officer Darren Rowlands, new to Ridgeway, transferred from 2 towns over. His reputation hadn't arrived yet, but his arrogance had. He scanned the room as though ownership came with his badge. He ordered a coffee, joked with a couple of regulars, loud enough for everyone to hear. His laugh carried a kind of sharpness that wanted attention. Then, when his eyes landed on Gloria sitting alone, something in her stillness bothered him. Some men feel threatened not by anger but by calm. He walked over to her table, cup in hand. "Morning, ma'am," he said, his tone already too casual, too familiar. "Coffee's good today, huh?" Gloria looked up, polite but guarded. "Yes, officer, it is." Roland smirked, rocking on his heels. "You from around here?" "I am," she replied simply. "Don't see you talking much. You waiting for someone?" "No," she said, "just thinking." He chuckled, thinking about what? She gave the kind of gentle shrug that ends conversations. Life. Something in that answer irritated him, the way she didn't give him the performance he expected. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You know, when someone in uniform talks to you, it's respectful to make conversation." Gloria met his gaze without flinching. "And it's respectful," she said quietly, "not to demand it." The cafe went still, conversations froze halfway through sentences. The barista's hand hovered over the register. People glanced toward the window, pretending not to see, but everyone felt the tension hang like smoke. Rolands's jaw tightened. "You think you can talk to me like that?" he asked, voice rising. "I'm the law here." "No," she said, calm as rain. "You're a man in a uniform. The law lives elsewhere." Her tone wasn't defiant. It was factual, almost tender, and that made it sting. Something in him snapped. The pride, the insecurity, the need to dominate, all of it boiled over in a flash of spite. He picked up her coffee cup. For a second, no one believed he'd actually do it. But then the cup tilted, steaming liquid spilling across the table, down onto her lap. The sound of the splash cut through the silence like glass breaking. Gloria gasped softly but didn't move. The heat bit through her skirt, pain climbed up her leg, but she refused to give him that satisfaction. Around them, chairs scraped, a few people muttered, but no one intervened. Roland set the empty cup back down. "Maybe next time you'll show some respect," he said. Gloria's hands trembled once, then stilled. She looked at him, truly looked, the way only mothers look at children who have lost their way. There was sorrow in her eyes, not fear, and that sorrow unsettled him more than anger ever could. He turned on his heel, leaving the cafe to its stunned quiet. The door closed behind him, and the bell's jingle sounded almost mocking. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the barista rushed over with napkins. "Ma'am, are you okay? Should I call someone?" Gloria shook her head. "It's just coffee," she whispered. She stood, gathering her purse, dignity intact though her dress was ruined. She thanked the girl, smiled faintly, and walked out into the morning air. But the moment didn't vanish with her. A teenager near the counter had filmed the whole thing on his phone. He hadn't planned to, he'd just seen injustice and instinctively hit record. The video was 38 seconds long. By noon it was online. By 3 o'clock it had 1,000 shares. By evening 50,000. The world had seen it, the uniform, the cruelty, the silence. People argued in the comments, some defended, some condemned. But almost everyone asked the same question: who was the woman who didn't flinch? That night, Gloria sat in her small living room, legs bandaged, a cup of tea cooling beside her. She didn't own a smartphone, so she didn't see the video. But she felt something moving beyond her walls, a ripple spreading through the town she'd quietly lived in all her life. Across town, in a modest house lined with framed commendations and old photographs, another phone buzzed. Chief Marcus Hall picked it up, expecting a routine call. Instead, he heard his deputy's strained voice. "Chief, you need to see this video." When he clicked the link, the image filled his screen. Officer Rowlands, standing over a woman, coffee spilling, laughter in the background. It took him 3 seconds to recognize her. His mother. Marcus froze, the world narrowing to that frozen frame. Every instinct as a son and as a chief collided. Anger rose like a tide, but beneath it was something colder, disbelief that the system he'd sworn to uphold could humiliate the woman who'd taught him everything about integrity. He didn't slam his fist, he didn't shout, he just stared at the screen until the image blurred. In that moment, something inside him shifted from law to justice. Back at the cafe, people whispered. The barista gave statements to reporters. The teenager's video spread beyond Ridgeway, picked up by national accounts. Headlines appeared: racist cop pours coffee on elderly black woman. Others added, victim remains silent. The story grew faster than anyone could control. But Gloria stayed home, refusing interviews, refusing sympathy. She tended her small garden, listened to the radio, and answered her son's calls with calm assurance. "I'm fine, Marcus," she said gently. "Don't fight with anger, fight with truth." Still, her voice trembled at the edges. She had lived long enough to know that truth was heavier than rage, and carrying it required steady hands. For Officer Rowlands, the backlash came quick. Suspended, interrogated, placed on administrative leave. Yet he showed no remorse, only confusion that a minor incident had ruined him. He told his peers she had provoked him, that people exaggerated, but in every version of his story he left out the silence, her silence that exposed him. In the days that followed, the town began to change. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now spoke of justice in the grocery aisles. The cafe owner painted over the stain on the floor but couldn't scrub away the memory. And behind every whispered conversation was the same unspoken thought: if it could happen to her, it could happen to anyone. The world saw a video. Marcus saw a wound in his town's soul. And Gloria saw an opportunity to remind people that dignity doesn't vanish when someone tries to pour it away. She never planned to become a symbol, she only wanted peace. But peace, she realized, sometimes begins with confrontation you never ask for. As night settled over Ridgeway again, Gloria sat by her window watching the streetlights flicker on. Somewhere out there, her son was preparing for a battle he didn't choose. She whispered a prayer, not for revenge, but for wisdom. And miles away, Marcus stood in front of the mirror, his badge glinting in the dim light. He saw his own reflection layered over the image burned into his memory, his mother sitting still while cruelty tried to humiliate her. He understood now what her silence meant. It wasn't surrender, it was strength under fire. It was the kind of strength a man could build a movement on. The next morning, as the sun rose over Ridgeway, the cafe reopened. People came not for the coffee, but for the story that had spilled across that floor. They spoke softer now, they tipped more. They watched each other with the uneasy awareness that something sacred had been violated and something righteous was beginning to stir. Gloria didn't return that day, she didn't need to. Her silence still sat in that corner seat, invisible but undeniable. The boy who filmed the video walked past the shop, noticing a small sign taped to the window. It read, "Respect is stronger than hate." He smiled, took a picture, and kept walking. By then, Marcus had already drafted a press release. It would be the first of many. He chose his words carefully, enough to promise accountability, not enough to reveal the storm building behind the scenes. Because this was only the beginning. The world saw a viral clip. Marcus saw a mission. And Gloria, sitting alone with her tea, saw what she had always believed. That quiet does not mean powerless. That truth doesn't shout, it waits, and when the time is right, it speaks through those brave enough to remain calm in the face of cruelty. The coffee cooled, but the silence burned hotter than fire. And Ridgeway would never forget the day a woman's grace became the spark that lit a revolution. Because sometimes change doesn't begin with noise. Sometimes it begins with silence strong enough to shake the world. The morning after the cafe incident, Ridgeway woke up different. Phones buzzed before alarm clocks. Screens lit up in kitchens and classrooms. There it was, the short clip, 38 seconds of humiliation and stillness that everyone suddenly needed to see. People watched once, twice, again, then shared it. The internet doesn't sleep, and by sunrise the whole country had opinions about a place most of them had never heard of. At first it was outrage. Then disbelief. Then curiosity. Who was she? Why didn't she react? How could he? Some called it bravery. Some called it shock. But all agreed on one thing: the silence was louder than the coffee that hit the floor. Gloria Hall, still unaware of how far her image had traveled, spent her morning the same way she always did, watering her plants, folding laundry, humming to herself. She didn't own a smartphone, just an old radio that crackled through gospel stations. Neighbors peeked through their windows, whispering, watching reporters pull up outside her small house on Willow Lane. They knocked, gentle at first, then urgent. "Mrs. Hall, may we have a word?" She didn't answer. She kept humming quietly, a tune her late husband used to sing while fixing fences. Inside the police department, Chief Marcus Hall's office felt like a storm cloud ready to burst. His deputy Ruiz stood beside him, eyes locked on the viral video paused on his monitor. "It's everywhere, Chief," she said softly. "Every channel, every platform, they're asking for a statement." Marcus hadn't slept. The image of his mother's face, composed, wounded, enduring, haunted him. He pressed his hands together. "We'll release one, but not yet. I need to see Rollins first." Officer Rollins sat in an interrogation room downstairs, pale but defiant. When Marcus entered, the air tightened. "Do you know who that woman was?" Marcus asked. Rollins shrugged. "Just some old lady with an attitude. Didn't think it was a big deal until everyone lost their minds." Marcus's voice dropped. "That woman is my mother." The silence that followed was heavier than the room could hold. Rollins blinked, color draining from his face. "Your chief, I didn't." Marcus cut him off. "You didn't think, that's the problem." He left the room before anger could say what professionalism wouldn't. By midday, national news vans rolled into Ridgeway. The cafe was crowded again, not with customers but with cameras. The owner, Dana, stood behind the counter trying to keep order while reporters took photos of the corner table, the floor still faintly stained despite scrubbing. Outside, a group of young people held handmade signs, "Justice for Gloria." They weren't activists yesterday, but the video had changed them. Across social media, her calm became a symbol. Memes, quotes, edits with soft piano music, people wrote. This woman didn't need to scream, her silence screamed for her. But fame is never simple. In comment sections, others defended the officer, twisting the narrative. "We don't know what she said before," some posted. "She provoked him," said others. The truth was a battleground and everyone wanted to fight inside it. Gloria watched none of it. She sat by her window, watching rain streak the glass. The knock came again that afternoon, her son this time. He stepped inside quietly, the way sons do when the weight of the world is already on their shoulders. "Mom," he said, voice thick, "why didn't you tell me?" She looked up from her chair. "Because, Marcus, you'd have come here like a storm, and storms don't heal, they destroy." He knelt beside her. "They poured coffee on you." "And I'm still here," she said simply. He wanted to argue, to shout, but her calm steadied him like a hand on his heart. She reached for his arm. "Don't fight for me, son, fight for what's right." That night the mayor called Marcus. "We're under pressure," he warned. "The media wants blood, handle it quietly. I don't want protests on my streets." Marcus replied, "Then maybe you should have built streets that could handle truth." He hung up before politics could bury conscience. By the second day, #Gloria Hall trended worldwide. A popular influencer uploaded a reaction. "This broke my heart. Look at her eyes. She's seen this before." Millions watched. Celebrities tweeted support. Others posted coffee cups with captions like *respect over age. The small town became a mirror for a nation's discomfort. Every diner conversation, every church sermon, every classroom debate circled back to that single moment of silence. In the cafe, a donation jar appeared by the register. "Help Gloria replace her dress." By nightfall, it was full. By morning, there was enough to buy 100 dresses. People she'd never met wanted to give something back, though she'd never asked. Meanwhile, Rollins's world unraveled. His friends avoided him. The union distanced itself. Reporters camped outside his apartment. He told anyone who'd listen that he was the real victim. "They're ruining my life over coffee," he said on a call that someone recorded and leaked. The clip only made things worse. On the third day, Gloria finally left her house. She wore a long gray coat and carried her purse the way women of her generation did, with purpose. When she walked down Maple Street, people stopped. Some clapped quietly, others simply nodded. No one spoke to her first. They waited for her to decide if she wanted to be seen. She went straight to the cafe. Dana froze when she saw her. "Mrs. Hall," she whispered, "you don't have to." "I know," Gloria said, "but I want to." She took her seat, the same seat as before, ordered the same black coffee. The chatter dimmed until the room was filled only with the hum of the machine. When Dana set the mug down, Gloria smiled. "Thank you, dear." People watched, phones discreetly lowered this time, afraid to cheapen the moment. She took a sip, nodded, and said softly, "Still just right." Later that evening, Marcus stood before the press. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded his face. "As chief of police," he began, "I am responsible for the conduct of my officers. What happened to Mrs. Gloria Hall was inexcusable. Officer Rowlands has been suspended pending investigation. Our department will fully cooperate with external review. A reporter shouted, "Is it true she's your mother?" Marcus paused. "It is, and that makes this both personal and professional. But justice doesn't change with relation. It either exists or it doesn't." The clip of that statement went viral too. For Gloria, the attention felt like a storm of kindness and intrusion mixed together. Strangers mailed letters. One wrote, "You reminded me of my grandmother. She taught me grace too." Another said, "Your silence was louder than 1,000 speeches." She kept them in a shoebox beside her chair. But at night she prayed for peace, not for herself, but for a town now forced to look in the mirror. Because she knew fame fades, justice, if it's real, must grow roots. A week after the video, Ridgway held a small community meeting at the church. People filled the pews. Marcus stood at the front explaining reforms, body cameras, bias training, new complaint protocols. But what people wanted most was to hear Gloria speak. When he gestured toward her, she rose slowly. Every eye followed her. "I didn't come here to talk about what happened to me," she said. "I came because what happened shouldn't surprise us anymore. I don't want pity, I want change. And change starts with listening, not shouting." Her voice trembled but carried through the room. "I've lived in this town all my life. I know its kindness and its cruelty. I still believe in its heart, but we can't heal what we refuse to name." For a long time, no one clapped. Then a single person stood, then another. And then the whole room rose in quiet applause, slow, respectful, heavy with realization. Outside, reporters recorded her words, and by the next morning the internet had found its new headline, "The Silent Woman Speaks." But she hadn't spoken to become famous. She spoke to make silence mean something more than pain. As the days passed, Ridgway became a case study in how fast truth spreads and how slow systems bend. The mayor announced a review commission. Marcus built a task force. Rowlands prepared an appeal. Everyone, it seemed, was reacting, but Gloria simply returned to her life. Each morning she brewed her coffee at home. Each evening she wrote in a small notebook. She titled the first page, "Things Worth Staying Silent For." The list was short: peace, dignity, faith. On the next page she wrote, "Things Worth Speaking For." The list never ended. By the time the national networks moved on to the next story, Ridgway still carried the echo. The cafe had framed a still image from the video, the second before the cup tipped. Below it was a plaque, "Dignity lives here." Gloria didn't need to see it to know. She could feel it each time a stranger smiled differently, each time her son's voice steadied with purpose. The silence she had held that morning had become a language others were finally learning to speak. And somewhere deep inside, she understood that the coffee was never the beginning, it was the spark. The beginning was every quiet moment before, every time she chose patience over bitterness. That day simply revealed it to the world. The video might fade from trending lists, but Ridgway had changed forever. Its people had seen what silence could do and what it demanded of them. Because silence, when carried with grace, doesn't end a story. It begins one. The storm of attention did not pass, it deepened. For Ridgway, the days after Gloria's speech felt like standing in front of a mirror that no one could turn away from. Everywhere, conversations began with her name. Every radio program, every sermon, every dinner table argument seemed to circle the same truth. Something rotten had been uncovered, and the town couldn't pretend not to smell it anymore. Shops pinned signs of support in their windows. The grocery clerk kept a jar labeled *** coffee for change. Strangers nodded at one another on sidewalks, cautious but newly aware. Ridgway was small enough that everyone knew someone who knew someone involved, and large enough for tension to live in every corner. At the police headquarters, Chief Marcus Hall walked the corridors under a different kind of silence, one filled with watchful eyes. He could feel it, half the department waiting for him to fail, the other half unsure if following him meant losing their friends. He tried to ignore the whispers, the stiff greetings, the way a few conversations died when he entered a room. Deputy Ruiz followed close behind, reading from a stack of reports. "We've had 34 new complaints since the video," she said. "Most are old cases people never filed before. They think someone might listen now." Marcus nodded. "Then we'll listen, every single one." Ruiz hesitated. "That's going to make enemies." He smiled without humor. "Then we'll know who they are." He didn't realize just how soon that would matter. By the end of the week, the mayor called a closed meeting at City Hall. Marcus was invited or summoned, depending on how one looked at it. The long oak table was lined with men in suits and women in tailored blazers, their expressions caught somewhere between sympathy and fear. Mayor Lane began with polite exhaustion. "Chief Hall, the town is under a microscope. We're getting calls from state offices, national outlets, donors. The economy's taking a hit. People are afraid of protests turning violent. You need to calm this down." Marcus answered steadily, "I can't calm it down without cleaning it up." A council member leaned forward. You've already suspended one officer, isn't that enough for appearances? Appearances aren't justice, Marcus replied. The mayor's smile hardened. Justice doesn't pay our bills. When the noise faded, Ridgway was left with something heavier than outrage, responsibility. The protests slowed, the reporters left, but the town couldn't go back to sleep. The morning calm that once defined it had been replaced by an uneasy awareness that justice wasn't a word, it was work. Chief Marcus Hall knew it best. The stack of complaints on his desk kept growing. Every letter, every email, every trembling voice that came through the department phone line was another story of someone ignored, dismissed, or talked over. For years, people had whispered. Now they were speaking, and he refused to turn away. Deputy Ruiz entered with another box of files. More from archives, she said. These go back 15 years. Marcus exhaled. We'll read every one. She set the box down. Chief, you're going to make enemies doing this. He looked up at her. Good, I'd rather see them than pretend they're not there. That afternoon, he called the department together. The briefing room was tense, crossed arms, silent resentment. He stood before them, voice steady. We're reopening every closed complaint, he announced. This isn't punishment, it's cleansing. If your conscience is clear, you'll be fine. If not, consider this your warning. Murmurs rippled through the ranks. Some nodded, others glared. A few walked out, but the line had been drawn. Outside, the cafe on Maple Street reopened under a new rhythm. It had become a meeting place for dialogue. Teachers, activists, and neighbors gathered there to talk about fairness, to remember what had happened, and to imagine how the town could grow. On one wall hung a large photo of Gloria, sitting calm, eyes lifted. Under it, grace is power. Gloria herself stayed home most days. She never liked attention. Her garden, once a private refuge, became her sanctuary again. Each morning she tended the flowers while mail arrived in stacks. Some letters were beautiful thank yous from strangers, notes from schools studying her story. Others dripped with bitterness. You embarrassed our town, one said. Stay quiet next time. She read them all, then burned the cruel ones in her fire pit. Ashes don't talk, she murmured. Across town, Marcus found corruption layered like old paint. Files marked closed held patterns, same officers, same excuses, same signatures of dismissal. At the center of it all sat Captain Richard Bowers. Marcus had once admired him, had even called him a mentor. Now, reading the paperwork, he saw how trust could hide rot. Ruiz entered one evening with trembling hands. Chief, look at this. She handed him a ledger, off-the-books payments labeled community expenses. The numbers didn't lie. Money had been siphoned year after year. Marcus leaned back, weariness settling in. They called it community, he said quietly, but it bought silence. He drafted suspensions that night, Bowers first. A few others followed. He didn't sleep. The department felt like a house whose foundation he was ripping up while still standing inside it. When the suspensions became public, backlash hit hard. The police union accused him of betrayal. The mayor called it overreach. Local radio hosts fumed that he was bowing to mobs. But the people, the ones who had watched Gloria's calm turn to courage, kept showing up outside City Hall with signs that read Hall's house cleaning equals justice. Gloria watched the coverage from her living room, tea in hand. The camera showed her son standing before reporters, answering calmly, refusing to bend. Pride and worry shared space in her heart. You're fighting fire with truth, she whispered to the screen. Don't get burned. One evening, Marcus drove to see her. He found her in the garden, pruning roses. You're pruning too early, he said. She smiled. Sometimes you cut before it hurts, makes the healing cleaner. He sat beside her. They're turning against me, Mom, the mayor, the union. Half the town thinks I'm out for revenge. And the other half, she asked. They're scared. Then you're doing something right. He laughed softly. You always make it sound simple. It is simple, she said. Not easy, but simple. You can't clean a wound without seeing the blood. In the following weeks, evidence of wrongdoing poured out. Old bodycam footage, false reports, cases dismissed for lack of evidence when evidence had been locked in drawers. Each discovery became a headline. Each headline divided the town a little more. The mayor summoned Marcus again. This time the meeting was shorter. Chief, this crusade of yours is killing us politically, the mayor snapped. This isn't politics, Marcus replied. It's accountability. Then take your accountability and your badge somewhere else, the mayor warned. But firing him outright would make things worse. The mayor knew it, so did Marcus. They left the room knowing war had begun in all but name. Meanwhile, Gloria became the quiet conscience of Ridgway. People stopped her on the street to thank her. Children handed her drawings. Church members asked her to speak again. She declined most invitations but kept listening. One evening she told Tanya Harris, my son's cleaning house, but every home in this town has a bit of dust. They'll need to sweep their own too. When news broke that Captain Bowers had been formally charged with obstruction, the town split wide open. Protesters cheered. Loyalists marched in defense of the old Ridgway. For days, downtown felt like two different worlds separated by police tape. Marcus watched from his office window, wondering if truth always had to come dressed in chaos. That night he returned to the basement of headquarters where the oldest records were stored. Dust swirled in his flashlight beam. He pulled one box labeled Retired Officer's Personal. Inside he found a VHS tape cracked but intact labeled *** Creel 2006. He didn't recognize the name, but the tape felt like a message from the past. The next morning he played it in an old recorder. The screen flickered, training footage from nearly 20 years ago. A line of recruits stood at attention. In front of them, instructing, was Captain Bowers, and beside him a younger officer named Creel. Their voices echoed through static. Bowers said, "Remember, family protects family. We keep things in-house." Creel laughed. "And if you can't keep quiet, maybe you shouldn't wear blue." Marcus stopped the tape, his heart pounded. He understood now that corruption wasn't random. It had been taught, inherited like a family heirloom. By the end of that day, he turned the footage over to state investigators. Ridgway's police department wasn't just cleaning, it was being rebuilt from the ground up. Gloria heard about the tape from the evening news. She sat on her porch wrapped in a shawl, the setting sun painting the sky orange. "So the basement finally opened," she murmured. "Good, that's where truth hides." For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, to feel pride untangled from fear. She knew her son's battle wasn't finished. But she also knew he had found his compass, the same one she had given him long ago when he was a boy learning right from wrong. That night she wrote a new entry in her notebook. "Things worth cleaning even when the world says they're fine." Underneath she listed hearts, homes, justice. Ridgway still buzzed with division, but something pure was beginning to form under the noise, a recognition that change was no longer optional. It was happening, it was necessary, and though it hurt, it was healing. Because cleaning house isn't about punishing the past. It's about preparing for a future that deserves light. By early autumn, Ridgway no longer felt like the same town. The banners from protests had faded, but their ghosts hung on every streetlight. Conversations that once stopped at the edges of politeness now spilled into the open. Neighbors argued in grocery aisles, teachers rewrote lesson plans, and church sermons stretched past their usual endings. The question everyone whispered had changed from "what happened?" to "what happens now?" Chief Marcus Hall faced that question every morning the moment he stepped into his office. The walls were lined with new reports, fresh evidence, and the echoes of a system he had sworn to protect but could no longer defend. He had started something that could not be neatly finished. The old way had been torn open, and now there was no turning back. Deputy Ruiz entered with a folder. "Sir," she said, "we got the preliminary report from the state investigation. They're confirming what we found, corruption dating back 20 years. It names Bowers, Creel, and," she hesitated, "Mayor Lane." Marcus took the file slowly. "Then it's bigger than the department." Ruiz nodded. "Much bigger." For a long moment he said nothing. Then it ends here." That afternoon the mayor called him. "Chief, we need to talk," Lane said, his voice tight. "You're playing with fire. You've made your point. Let it go before this city burns." "It's already burning," Marcus replied. "I'm just trying to stop the rot from spreading." "Rot doesn't pay taxes," the mayor snapped. "Scandal doesn't pave roads. Think about your future." "I'm thinking about my mother," Marcus said, and hung up. The same night, Ruiz found an envelope slid under the office door. No return address, only a single phrase typed across the front: "You missed one." Inside was a list of names, officers and officials Marcus didn't recognize, connected by bank transfers and coded memos. At the bottom, a note: "Follow the money to the mayor's re-election fund." Marcus felt the weight of what that meant. Exposing it would shake Ridgway to its roots, but burying it would make him complicit in the very silence his mother had defied. The next morning, he held a press conference. Cameras crowded the steps of police headquarters. He stood before them, no notes, no teleprompter, only conviction. "2 months ago," he began, "a single act of cruelty forced us to face ourselves. It revealed not just a bad officer but a broken culture. We promised to find the truth. Today we're keeping that promise." He announced the findings: falsified reports, hidden accounts, political interference. Each word struck like a hammer. When he named the mayor, reporters gasped. Questions erupted, but he raised a hand. "No one is above accountability," he said, "not even me." That line became the headline by evening. Inside City Hall, Mayor Lane watched the broadcast in disbelief. "He's finished," he muttered to his aides. "I'll make sure of it." But outside, Ridgway didn't react with shock, it reacted with relief. People had suspected for years that something deeper was wrong. Now they had proof. Within hours, citizens flooded the mayor's office with calls demanding resignation. The council called for an emergency vote. At home, Gloria sat in her chair, the evening news glowing across her living room. Her son's face filled the screen, calm, resolute, the way his father's used to be. She whispered, "You found your way through the fire, baby. Don't stop walking." Meanwhile, Rollins resurfaced. Out of suspension but bitter, he tried to defend himself online, claiming he was a scapegoat. His words only reignited outrage. He called into a local radio show saying, "If I'd known she was the chief's mother, I'd have thought twice." The host cut him off. "You shouldn't have to know who someone's mother is to treat them with decency." That clip went viral too, but this time it was Rollins who defined the story. It was Ridgway. In town meetings, citizens demanded reform. People who had never spoken at microphones found themselves trembling but determined. "I used to cross the street when I saw an officer," said one woman. "Now I want to cross that line with hope." Applause followed her words. The mayor tried to survive, holding one last press conference. Cameras flashed as he blamed political witch hunts and media hysteria. But mid-sentence, a voice shouted from the back, "What about the payoffs, Mr. Lane?" He froze. The cameras caught the flicker of guilt. Within 24 hours, he was indicted. When the news broke, Ridgway erupted again, this time not in protest but in vindication. People gathered downtown not with anger but with candles. They lit them on the courthouse steps, whispering prayers for a cleaner beginning. Marcus watched from his office window. Ruiz stood beside him. "You did it," she said. He shook his head. "We started it. There's still rebuilding to do." Down the street, the cafe glowed with evening light. Gloria entered quietly, her first visit since the incident months before. The customers turned, some smiling, some tearful. The owner, Dana, greeted her warmly. "Your table's waiting." Gloria smiled. "It always is." She sat in her old corner, sipping her black coffee. For a few moments, she simply watched the room, new faces, softer tones, eyes that didn't dart away anymore. She realized that the world hadn't changed completely, but people had begun trying, and that was something sacred. Later, she walked out into the cool air and saw Marcus waiting by his car. They stood under the streetlight, mother and son, the town's quiet in its storm. He said, "It's over, Mom." She smiled, "No, son, it's beginning." "Do you think they'll forgive us for turning everything upside down?" "Maybe not," she said, "but they'll thank us when they can breathe clean air again." They drove home in silence, the kind that wasn't heavy anymore. It was peace earned, not given. The following week, the State Commission arrived to oversee reforms. Officers resigned or retrained. The department installed cameras in every room, transparency as policy, not promise. Marcus met with community leaders to rewrite procedures from scratch. "We can't erase what happened," he told them, "but we can make sure silence never has to speak for justice again." In schools, teachers used Gloria's story to teach courage. Children drew her portrait in art class, labeling it strength. The cafe owner renamed her favorite seat * the hall table. People still whispered about the scandal, but more often they spoke about change. The mayor's trial began quietly, far from Ridgway. Reporters covered it for a while, then moved on. But in town, people remembered. They remembered the coffee, the video, the silence. They remembered how everything started with one woman choosing dignity over outrage. And as winter approached, the town prepared for its first Christmas unafraid of conversation. Decorations hung again on Main Street, lights strung from poles that had once held protest signs. The world moved on, but Ridgway stayed awake. On Christmas Eve, Marcus visited Gloria. They sat by the window watching snow fall. "You know," he said, "people call you a hero." Gloria shook her head. "Heroes fight battles, I just refuse to start one." He smiled. "That's the same thing, Mom." They fell silent, listening to carolers in the distance. For the first time in months, the quiet felt like home again. The next day, a letter arrived addressed to both of them. No return name, only the words, "From a friend who finally understands." Inside was a simple message. "Truth doesn't destroy towns, it rebuilds them." Marcus read it twice, then tucked it into his pocket. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing Ridgway in clean white silence. And somewhere in that hush, the town exhaled, ready to begin again. By spring, the town of Ridgway looked healed on the surface. The banners were gone, the coffee shop buzzed with laughter again, and the mayor's office sat empty, waiting for new leadership. But beneath the calm, the past still murmured. Justice had been declared, but not everything had been uncovered. Chief Marcus Hall woke before sunrise most mornings. Habit, or maybe vigilance, kept him restless. The department had been rebuilt, walls painted fresh white, officers retrained. Yet every time he passed the basement storage door, he felt something unsaid behind it, an itch in the conscience of a man who'd learned that silence always hides something. Deputy Ruiz found him there one morning, flashlight in hand. "Chief," she said, "you can't keep chasing ghosts." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but if they're here, I want to meet them." They went through boxes marked *archive closed. Most held old reports, training manuals, forgotten badges. But near the back, a single box bore a faded label, Creel Personal. Marcus had heard that name before, one of the early officers tied to the cover-ups. He knelt and lifted the lid. Inside were journals, tapes, and photographs, grainy images of recruits, meetings, unrecorded events. and at the bottom, a sealed envelope addressed simply to whoever cleans up after us. He opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. If this box survived, then the truth outlived the lie. We built a wall of silence to protect ourselves. We told young men to keep quiet, to choose loyalty over conscience. I'm sorry. Officer Daniel Creel. Marcus folded the paper carefully. The apology came too late for most, but it mattered that it existed, proof that even the corrupt sometimes wish to confess. That night he sat at his desk long after the station emptied. He wrote a memo titled Transparency Archive Project Asterisk, ordering every remaining record digitized and made public. When Ruiz read it the next day, she said, "You're really going to open everything?" "Yes," Marcus answered. "If light burns us, then we deserve the burn." While the department wrestled with its own past, Ridgway prepared for a new future. Elections were announced. Tanya Harris, once an organizer marching through the square, now ran for mayor. Her slogan read, "Lead with listening." Gloria watched her campaign from afar, pride flickering behind her quiet smile. "Times change fast," she told her neighbor. "One day you're invisible, the next you're history." The neighbor laughed. "History's not a bad thing to be." Gloria shook her head. "It's heavy, though." Letters still came to her home, fewer now but heartfelt. Teachers sent essays from students writing about courage. One girl wrote, "Mrs. Hall, I used to think silence meant weakness. Now I think it means control." Gloria kept that one on her fridge. In March, Ridgway held a ceremony to honor community leaders. The police chief, the deputy, and yes, Gloria Hall were among those recognized. Marcus stood behind her as she accepted a small plaque, "For reminding us that dignity can change the world." She looked out over the crowd and said softly, "Dignity didn't change the world, listening did." The audience rose in applause. It wasn't loud, but it was whole. That night back at home, Gloria found another envelope on her porch. No name, just the words, "Thank you for not yelling." Inside was a photo, the cafe freshly painted with a single coffee cup resting on her old table. On the back, someone had written, "Grace lives here." She placed it beside her window and let the memory settle. Across town, Marcus's reforms drew attention from beyond Ridgway. A state commission visited, reporters wrote cautiously hopeful articles, and neighboring cities asked for guidance. It was strange to see humility become policy, but it worked. Officers began walking neighborhoods again, not to patrol but to talk. Trust, fragile as glass, began to reform. Then one night, Ruiz burst into Marcus's office. "Chief, you need to see this." She set down a flash drive. Anonymous tip said it's connected to the basement files. Marcus opened it. The footage showed a young Creel decades ago sitting in a car with a man whose face was only half lit. His voice, however, was unmistakable. Mayor Lane, younger, promising promotions in exchange for silence. Ruiz exhaled, "Proof, real proof." Marcus closed his eyes. Too late to punish the dead, but not too late to teach the living. He sent the file to the state archive with one sentence attached: "Let the record show how silence starts." Afterward, he visited his mother. She was on the porch, knitting a shawl the color of morning fog. "You found more truth?" she asked without looking up. He nodded, "Always more." "Then keep digging," she said. "But remember, truth is a seed, not a shovel. Don't bury yourself with it." He smiled. "You always have the last word, huh?" "I earned it," she said, grinning. The weeks rolled on. The town voted. Tanya Harris became Ridgway's new mayor, swearing her oath beside Gloria. Cameras clicked, the same kind of flashes that once burned shame into the town, now capturing renewal. The cafe served free coffee that day. No bitterness, no spectacle, just warmth. During her speech, Mayor Harris said, "We are not the town of the video anymore. We are the town that learned from it." Applause rippled through the crowd. Gloria stood quietly in back, proud but humble. Marcus stood beside her, head bowed. For the first time since that day in the cafe, peace felt possible. A few weeks later, Marcus returned to the basement one last time. The light flickered, dust rising in lazy swirls. He sealed the last of the boxes, marking them public record, "Do not seal again." He locked the door, pocketed the key, and whispered, "No more basements." Outside, the air smelled of spring rain. He drove to his mother's house, where she waited with 2 cups of coffee. They sat on the porch, watching the world move quietly around them. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked. "Every morning," she said, "but not with pain, with purpose." He nodded. "You know, some people still call you the woman who started it all." She smiled faintly. "I didn't start anything, I just stopped pretending." They clinked their mugs softly. Steam rose and drifted into the cool evening. As twilight settled, Ridgway's streetlights flickered on. The town hummed with ordinary life again, children laughing, doors closing, footsteps echoing. The kind of quiet that used to hide things now sounded different, honest, earned. And as the night deepened, the voices of the past faded into the steady rhythm of a place learning how to live in truth. Because in the end, silence can start a storm, but it can also build a bridge. and in Ridgeway, silence had done both. The end. That was when Marcus realized the real battle wasn't public, it was internal. Ridgeway's leaders didn't want change, they wanted quiet. Outside, there was nothing quiet about what was happening. On Saturday, hundreds gathered downtown. The protest started as a small march, students, church groups, older couples holding hands, and grew into a river of movement. Signs painted with "Respect is stronger than hate" waved through the streets. Gloria's face appeared on posters and shirts, drawn from the still image of her sitting calm and unbroken. At home, Gloria watched from her porch. She could hear the faint rhythm of chants drifting from Main Street. The sound was strange, beautiful, and heavy at the same time. She didn't like being the symbol, but she understood that people needed symbols the way they needed sunlight to see where they were going. Tanya Harris, a community organizer, came to her fence carrying a clipboard. "Miss Hall," she called gently, "folks would love for you to join us, even just to wave." Gloria shook her head. "They don't need me out there, they've already found their voices." Tanya smiled sadly. "Maybe, but sometimes a crowd needs to see the face that reminded them they could speak." Gloria thought for a long moment, then said softly, "Let them walk, I've done my walking." Down the street, chants grew louder. "Justice for Gloria, justice for all." The noise carried to City Hall, where the mayor's blinds trembled from the vibration. Inside the police building, Ruiz turned on the local news. The footage filled the screen: peaceful marchers, handmade signs, and interviews with people who used to say nothing. "They're not stopping," Ruiz said quietly. Marcus watched, jaw tight but proud. "Good, maybe it means we're waking up." That afternoon, he went to his office and started opening old drawers, the ones marked "Closed Investigations." Files yellowed with age stared back at him, complaints marked "insufficient evidence, no action taken" or simply blank. He spent hours reading them. Every line told the same story: reports dismissed, voices ignored, wrongs unacknowledged. By midnight, the floor was covered with paper. Ruiz found him still there, sleeves rolled up. "You can't do this alone," she said. "I already was alone," he answered. "Now I'm just admitting it." Word spread quickly that the chief was reopening cases. Some officers resigned, others whispered support but stayed quiet, and a few began leaking rumors to the press, twisting Marcus's motives. One article claimed he was seeking revenge for his mother. Another accused him of politicizing pain. None of it slowed him down. At home, Gloria felt the ripples. Strangers mailed her letters, now mixed with anger, some thanking her, others blaming her for ruining a good man's career. She read them all, folded them neatly, and prayed over each one. She refused to let bitterness choose her words. Sunday morning, she walked to church as she always did. The congregation stood when she entered. The pastor paused mid-sermon, tears in his eyes. "Sister Gloria," he said, "your strength reminded us that silence isn't surrender." She nodded, sat quietly in her pew, and whispered, "All I did was sit still." By the next week, Ridgeway's unity began to fracture. A counter-protest formed near the courthouse, small at first, then loud. Signs read "back the blue *** and stop the witch hunt." Rollins' supporters accused Marcus of betraying his own. Reporters swarmed both sides, hungry for conflict. What had begun as a moment of reflection was becoming a battle for the town's soul. That evening, Marcus drove to his mother's house, needing silence more than ever. Gloria met him on the porch with 2 mugs of tea. "You look tired," she said. He sighed. "I'm trying to clean something that's been dirty for decades. Every time I scrub, more dirt shows up." She smiled faintly. "That's how you know you're cleaning." They sat together as dusk settled, streetlights flickering on. The hum of distant chants drifted through the air. "You think it'll ever stop?" he asked. "The noise," she said. "Yes, the change, not if you keep standing." The next morning brought another shock. An envelope slid under Marcus's office door, contained copies of payroll records, proof of falsified overtime, hush payments, and old cover-ups signed by former captains. There was no sender name, only a note: "Start with Bowers." Captain Richard Bowers had been with the department 30 years. He was respected, charming, and untouchable, or so everyone thought. Now Marcus stared at the documents, feeling betrayal settle like ice. He confronted Bowers that afternoon. "Tell me these aren't real," Marcus said, spreading the papers across his desk. Bowers glanced at them, eyes flat. "You think you can fix this place by making enemies of your own men. I think I can't fix it by protecting the wrong ones." For a moment, the 2 men just stood there, years of loyalty dissolving in silence. Then Bowers walked out, muttering, "You won't last a month." Marcus watched him go, already knowing the fight was larger than one department. That night, Ridgeway Square filled again, this time without organization or plan. Candles flickered, people sang softly. In the crowd, a woman placed a single cup of coffee on the steps of City Hall, a small act of remembrance and defiance. Others followed until dozens of cups lined the stairs, steam rising into the cold air. Gloria didn't attend, but she heard about it. She smiled to herself, understanding the symbolism. Where cruelty once poured coffee in hatred, love now poured it in solidarity. As the clock struck midnight, Ridgway stood at a crossroads, divided but alive. A town once silent now had too many voices to count, some angry, some hopeful, all unwilling to go back to pretending. And in that restless hum of change, both Gloria and Marcus knew this was far from over. Because justice isn't a single act, it's a town learning how to listen. That's it for today's video. Make sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this one.